Imagine it's January 1982. The Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas is a sea of fluorescent lights and the hum of early digital promise.
The Summer Consumer Electronics Show.
Amidst the prototype Laserdisc players and calculator watches, a beige breadbox is unveiled, the Commodore 64. To the suits in the room, it was a home office tool. To the kids, it was a toy, but of the future of rock music, it was a Trojan horse. Inside that plastic casing sat the SID 6581 chip. It wasn't designed by a computer engineer who only understood binary code. It was designed by Bob Yanes, a synthesizer obsessive who was frustrated by the thin, screechy beeps of the era. I thought the sound chips on the market were primitive and obviously had been designed by people who knew nothing about music. Yanes didn't want to build a computer chip, he wanted to build a 3-voice analog synthesizer on a single sliver of a silicon. I was attempting to create a single-chip synthesizer voice which hopefully would find its way into polyphonic polytimbral synthesizers. He gave it 4 waveforms, 3 voices and a resonant filter that would eventually become the most illegal sound in music.
Because the SID chip was ahead of its time, it was 3 channels of analog, but it was really well done. You could have lots of really nice instrumentation, you could do all things with filters.
While the elitists of 1982 were mortgaging their houses to buy a $30,000 Fairlight CMI or a Synclavier, a new generation of outsiders was discovering that they could achieve sonic aggression for a fraction of the price. The SID chip was messy. Because of the way it was mass-produced at the MOS Technology Factory, no 2 chips sounded identical. The resistance of the FETs varied considerably with processing, so different lots of SID chips had different cutoff frequency characteristics. The analog filters were inconsistent.
The thing that the music programmers had to really struggle with was the filter variation.
They were unpredictable. The filter is the worst part of SID, because I could not create high-gain op-amps in NMOS, which were essential to a resonant filter. They had a soul that could fail. The first person to truly weaponize this failing technology was Rob Hubbard. In 1984, working out of a bedroom in Hull, England, Hubbard began treating the Commodore 64 like a modular synth. For the 1985 track Monty on the Run, Hubbard didn't just write a jingle.
There were a few other things that you could do that weren't documented, and you would just set a couple of bits and get a strange new waveform coming from it. And then I expanded it to try to use it musically, which that was quite a challenge.
He used the chip's pulse width modulation and filter sweeps to create a lead sound that mimicked the screaming, overdriven character of a Marshall stack. It was the sound of digital punk, a mechanical chuck that bridges the gap between the 70s prog rock and Rick Wakeman and the 80s rebellion of the underground. But the global transmission didn't stop at game soundtracks. The SID sound began to bleed into the professional recording studios of the mid-80s, where the industrial rock revolution was beginning to ferment. By 1988, Al Jurgensen of Ministry was in Chicago studio, crafting the sonic blueprint for The Land of Rape and Honey. Jurgensen wasn't looking for the glassy perfection of the Yamaha DX7. None of it was planned, and those are always the best. The more you plan, the more you fail. He wanted friction.
Taking these archives and on this, I was locked alone in a room. I locked myself in and just started tape splicing. And when I got the first one done and I realized the possibilities of it, right then and there was my favorite moment of the whole album.
He wanted the sound of a machine having a psychological breakdown. The SID chip's low bit depth and dirty aliasing provided exactly that. It created a layer of mechanical dread, a texture that felt like it was tearing through the speakers. This wasn't just music, it was psychological house built out of 8-bit noise. As we moved in the 1990s, the Commodore 64's ghost moved from the industrial underground into the global mainstream. In 1994, Liam Howlett of The Prodigy was taking the bit crush textures of the SID chip and layering them under aggressive breakbeats. He understood that the SID's resonant filter had a biological quality. It sounded like it was breathing. In tracks across the music for the Jilted Generation era, you can hear the same 8-bit grid providing the lo-fi backbone to high-energy rave rock hybrid. Even the giants were taking notice. Radiohead, during the Kid A and Amnesiac sessions at the turn of the millennium, were actively looking for ways to humanize their electronics. They found it by looking backward at the imperfect digital sounds of the early 80s. I'm afraid not. Are recordings available in the US? They realized what Bob Yanes had known all along, that the most revolutionary tools are the ones that allow for the beautiful failure. The Commodore 64 wasn't the only machine to carry this torch. It paved the way for the Atari ST, which became the MIDI backbone of the 90s rock and roll and dance revolution, and the Amiga 500, which defined the crunchy sampling style of early trip-hop.
Use all the tricks that the SID chip was capable of.
If you think about it, we were essentially pioneers of this era, and discovering all this stuff on the Commodore 64 and the Amiga and other machines, it was really like this discovery of new capabilities.
Sometimes you could set 2 bits and get something completely different that wasn't in the documentation. But the SID chip remains the original secret weapon. Why? Because it represents the moment the toy became the terror. It took the power of sound design out of the hands of the gatekeepers and gave it to the kids who wanted to make the machines scream. When you hear a modern rock track today, from the distorted synths of Nine Inch Nails to the glitched out textures of Muse, you aren't just hearing modern software, you are hearing the legacy of 1982. You are hearing the ghost of a beige breadbox that was never supposed to be taken seriously. The lesson is simple. Perfection is the enemy of the heart, and I would say sometimes it's the enemy of the art. We don't listen for the notes, we listen for the friction. We listen for the moment the pattern breaks, we listen for the ghost in the silicon. That's what the art is about. Imperfection. Thank you for listening and see you in the next one.